Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkat. On November 3rd, Americans will head to the polls in what many are calling the most consequential U.S. election in a generation. And it's not just Americans who are holding their breath on who the next U.S. president will be. One country that is closely watching is Turkey. Relations with the Trump administration started off a bit rocky, mainly over the S-400 missile system and U.S. support for the YPG terror group in Syria. But over the past year, relations between Ankara and Washington have found some common ground. Donald Trump's challenger, former Vice President Joe Biden, has hinted he may take a tougher line against Turkey, but he's also expected to call for strengthening the NATO alliance. The U.S. election comes as the world continues to battle the coronavirus pandemic and as tensions flare up in global trouble spots. So, what could a Trump or Biden victory mean for Turkey's relations with the U.S.? And to answer that, I'm joined by Douglas Ollivant from Washington, D.C. He is a senior fellow at the Future of War Project at New America and the managing partner of Mented International, a global strategic consulting firm. And from Ankara, Yasin Asal, who is an assistant professor and the head of the Political Science and International Relations Department at Istanbul Ticaret University. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So the U.S. presidential elections are just around the corner. Douglas, could you talk to us about the current mood in the United States and how has the latest debate played out for both candidates?
Well, we'll have to see how the debate plays out today. It's still early morning here. It's very early on the West Coast. So we won't understand exactly how the debate played out for the next day or two. But certainly the election has galvanized the American public in a way we've not seen before. We now think somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 35 million Americans have already voted, have gone through the somewhat arduous process of doing early voting. You know, the polls aren't really set up until election day, so it's difficult to go vote early. And yet about 30 million Americans have done so. That's about 1/4 of the total number that voted in the 2016 presidential election. So we expect very, very high turnout. This election really has generated enthusiasm, whether that's positive or negative enthusiasm on the part of the voters. People are very, very engaged, and we certainly expect a lot of drama and emotion around the election.
Yeah. Or during the Trump administration, relations between Turkey and the U.S. have witnessed ups and downs from the sale of the Russian S-400 missile systems and the United States support for the YPG terror organization in Syria. So how do you think these sticking points will be dealt with if Trump wins a second term?
And in the first term of Trump presidency, we saw a good relations and ties between Turkey and US. But unfortunately, in the security concerns of Turkey are not so appropriate for the US grand strategy on Middle East. This is why, as you mentioned, S-400 and YPG is one of the most significant issues between Trump presidency and Republic of Turkey. And we clearly seen that Trump administration are willing to sustain these difficulties and started to a new phase at Syria. And this is why it is not so easy to make so softened ties in the Trump's next part.
Yes, but Douglas, on the other hand, former Vice President Joe Biden hasn't been shy about how he would deal with Turkey. He even hinted that he can intervene in the Turkish elections and that he opposes many Turkish policies. Where do you think relations between Ankara and Washington would go in a Biden presidency, especially in that crucial first year?
I think in some areas there would be ways in which it could improve. I think there would be an attempt to get a reset of relations with Turkey. But on the other hand, the S-400 issue is an issue in American politics that's far bigger than any one administration. It involves the Congress, it involves the Pentagon, and the Trump administration has actually been pretty good about trying to tamp down the consequences in American law. It's quite simple, of the S-400 sale. I think in a Biden presidency, the full consequences of what that sale means for Turkey and its relationship with the United States would come cascading down in a way that's not yet been seen.
Biden has also talked about reinforcing democracy, or both at home and abroad. How could Biden's election to the presidency impact its relations with the Middle Eastern countries and Gulf monarchies, and how would that affect the region?
Yes, exactly. This is won't be a surprise because in the term of Obama, there was similar correspondences and messages to the Middle Eastern countries. But indeed, we saw this soft power of American policy doesn't imply directly to the wealth of these regions. And those supports of U.S. administration to alternative groups in those countries are not so well in around the making non-violent actions. This is why the approach of Joe Biden's in the Middle Eastern countries will need to see in a time. It's not so easy to make a concrete result and concrete guess what will be done in very short time.
So, Douglas, do you believe he can reinforce democracy in the Middle Eastern countries and especially in Gulf monarchies?
Well, that is certainly a much larger scale project than any one man. But I do think that there's an important truth there. I think the relationship between the Trump administration and the Gulf monarchies, particularly Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, has been very, very close. You've not seen Trump criticize those countries at all, even in the wake of the Khashoggi killing. Yeah. I think that in a Biden administration, you see a much different reaction. And there would be a much more quid pro quo relationship with those states, with the United States expecting things from the Gulf monarchies in return for support in a way that perhaps we didn't see in the Trump administration.
So, Douglas, we also know that the NATO alliance has suffered under Trump, with the president constantly saying allies are not contributing their fair share. So can you talk about how NATO would be affected in a Biden first term?
I think candidate Biden, former Vice President Biden, has been quite clear that he would seek to reinforce the alliances. He's talked about getting on the phone and telling the allies that America is back. So I do think you would see a rejuvenation of the NATO alliance in a Biden administration. He has made that very much a point, that he thinks the criticism of the Trump administration of, in particular, that alliance, but all alliances, has been counterproductive to American interests.
Edward, also during Trump's presidency, tensions with Iran rose drastically. Trump pulled out of the 2015 nuclear deal, but Biden says he can re-enter it if the Tehran administration abided by the original terms. Can you talk about how tensions with Iran could play out in a Trump second term, or if Biden was president?
And this is also one of the main agenda of the Democrats, that they are trying to make some relations more soften. And in the current article of Joe Biden at Foreign Affairs, he also mentioned that the image of America would need to rebalance between the Trump presidency to the New Democrats. And this is why I do also wish and will see that the ties between Iran and the other problems like Mexico and some states for United States, that these will be in a softened part, and then we will see the Biden would like to reunite and rebuild the image of America around world politics and also regional partners.
And on the other hand, it's no secret, Douglas, that Turkey's relations with Russia lately haven't been as warm. They have disagreed on Libya, Syria, and lately with the latest conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So despite who wins on November the 3rd, is there a window for either Trump or Biden to improve the U.S.'s relations with Turkey, given the latest tensions?
I think there's absolutely a window to try to repair that relationship. I think certainly a Biden administration will, and perhaps even in a Trump second term, there would be a realization of the importance of that issue. But I can't stress enough how much the hands of any president are tied by American law and the S-400 decision. with Congress and the Pentagon very, very forcibly opposed to that decision, any president will have a very, very difficult time bringing America around to really improve relationships in Turkey, so long as the S-400 remains a lingering issue.
Also, Biden has outlined in his policies in an op-ed saying the U.S. should lead again. Or are we going to see a more globally motivated and a more assertive Washington administration if Biden gets elected?
Yes, indeed, he already gave these signals to the international media by using these approaches around the global and also regional counterparts. This also a historical image and also their political, political ties that they already started to do in their terms in the American politics. This is why that will be a natural result of if Biden's elected within the Democrat arguments. But I believe, and I agree with Mr. Douglas, that the S-400 and the security concerns won't be changed whether Trump or Biden, because that's also showed its signals in the geography and in the field. This is the reflections through the Turkish bilateral relations as well.
Unfortunately, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. It's something that Turkey has been warning about for the past year after the Syrian regime began its assault on the province of Idlib. Dozens of airstrikes and ground assaults by Bashar al Assad and his Russian allies directly targeted civilians. And according to Human Rights Watch, those attacks violated the laws of war. Haidar Abbasi explains.
Allahu Akbar.
Carnage on the streets of Idlib. This man is the only survivor of an airstrike launched just moments earlier. At least 5 people were killed. It seems there's nowhere for Syrians to hide. They're in constant fear of the threat from above. Civilians not only face attacks from the regime, but also from its ally, Russia. According to Human Rights Watch, these deaths aren't accidental. The organization says civilians are being targeted and that these attacks are war crimes.
What we found is that this is just a very deliberate strategy of the Syrian-Russian military alliance. This war crime strategy is designed to drive out the civilians, to make civilian life unlivable, in the hope that it then will be easier for Russian and Syrian armed forces to recapture the territory.
In a report published earlier this month, Human Rights Watch examines 46 strikes in Idlib between April 2019 and March this year. It cites repeated attacks on civilian infrastructure, from schools to hospitals. The report says they represent only a fraction of the military campaign in Idlib. Idlib is the only province of Syria held by the armed opposition. It fell to the rebels in 2015. The opposition once controlled large parts of the country, but since Russia intervened 5 years ago, and with the help of Iranian militants, the Syrian regime has recaptured most of the territory. Syria's Bashar al Assad has sworn to retake every region, including Idlib, which his soldiers have surrounded. At the start of the year, Syrian and Russian forces launched an offensive to recapture the province. At least 1 million people inside Idlib fled to the border with Turkey, leading to a humanitarian crisis.
We were sleeping when all of a sudden a Russian jet targeted us. I could hear my husband groaning under the wreckage. I couldn't hear the voices of my 2 daughters, my sister-in-law and her daughter, my father-in-law and mother-in-law. I knew they were dead.
Syria and Russia say the operation in Idlib is in response to multiple attacks by the opposition. They deny committing any war crimes. Idlib was subject to a ceasefire agreed between Turkey and Russia in 2017, but that's been repeatedly violated. The regime is slowly recapturing more territory in Idlib. It's not the first time Russian and Syrian forces have been accused of war crimes. But will anyone be held to account? Haider Abbasi, Straight Talk.
And joining me now from Tallahassee, Florida, is Ali Demirdas. He's a political analyst and an assistant professor of international relations. And from Daha, Fadel Abdul Ghany, who is the founder and chairman of the Syrian Network for Human Rights. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Again, we're talking about Syria's largest opposition enclave. Fadel, what's the latest in Idlib?
Actually, the latest is that the continuous attack is still taking place in Idlib against the civilians, which is threaten at least 3 million population, even if those attacks are just targeting a specific area or cities, but that means that all the population will be terrified, actually, because they don't know which attack will taking place at the next level. We noticed that the vast majority of those attacks are far away from the clashes line. Actually, it's deliberately targeting civilians' infrastructure based on our documentation. The frequent attack actually is referring that those attacks are deliberate. Mm-hmm. That means those amount to be crimes against humanity and war crimes actually. And there is no lead to any investigation is taking place from the Russian or the Syrian regime at all. There is no one at all interior investigation, I mean. In spite of that, there is several referral to those attacks in the UN Security Council and yes. the Human Rights Council. So they are aware, those countries, the head of those countries, they are aware. So the Human Rights Watch report named 10 senior level, accused them that they are directly in charge based on the responsibility of command in those attacks. And they are naming Bashar al Assad, the head of the state, yes. and Vladimir Putin as well.
So, Ali, it's something that Turkey has been warning about for the past year. What could Turkey do further? I mean, because Turkey is already hosting about 4 million Syrian refugees and it wants to keep Idlib somewhat stable. But how would it play out if the regime continued to target civilian areas?
Turkey has a daunting task in Idlib, convincing Russia to not interfere militarily. I think we need to understand why Russia is very nervous about Idlib. They're very particularly nervous about the area. There is estimated 20,000 fighters from the Caucasus and Central Asia, which basically concerns Russia. It is very difficult for Turkey to come up with any solution because it is important to convince Russia not to bomb the area, to stop creating a humanitarian disaster, which has happened before. Mm-hmm. So Turkey has to negotiate with Russia to at least create a safe zone in the area, as well as the regime. So in the near future, I'm expecting the resumption of Turkey's military incursions into Syria to create yes. a bigger safe zone for the refugees, particularly from Idlib.
So Fadel, how would this latest situation on the ground, which could maybe eventually lead to another mass displacement of millions of people, impact humanitarian efforts? And we know that another winter draws closer.
Yeah, and that's lead me to other fundamental point that the regime and Russia is keep blocking also aid for those targeted civilians. And they are also targeting, we record the targeting against the displaced camp as well. So this displacement will keep continue actually, will keep taking place, and the civilians will still suffer. And I echo also what Ali said regarding that this responsibility not only for Turkey, this is the international community responsibility, both based on the Article 1 of Geneva Convention, that all the state parties should respect and ensure respect they are not ensure respect of the Russia or the regime responsibility for respect the Geneva Convention. So that lead me to the root of the displacement. The attack against civilians should stop, and the accelerating toward pressure the regime toward a political solution that will settle down the situation. Otherwise, the displacement, the war crimes and the crimes against humanity, the killing and other types of violation will keep continue, and will keep noticing that the frustration of people will increase, and we'll keep noticing that the extremist group will feeding from this mess.
So given the latest situation in the region, Ali, is there going to be need for a renewed agreement between Turkey and Russia for de-escalation?
Well, when we look at the history of the agreements between Turkey and Russia in Syria, we see that the Russian party and the regime haven't fulfilled its promises, and those agreements have been repeatedly broken. Therefore, I don't think there is any use of having another agreement with Russia when we know that Russia is very nervous about Idlib, and any sort of agreement is not going to hold. Therefore, I'm expecting Turkey's use of military to resolve this issue. And again, I'm expecting a Turkish incursion in the near future in east of Euphrates, as well as the Manbij area, to relieve the pressure of Idlib.
So, Fadel, is Assad drawing closer to his promise to reclaim every inch of his country, of that region? And what's the end game in Idlib?
I don't think that Assad is able to do that. This is like his dream, actually, and the Russian is keep helping him, but this is not easy at all. And he keep doing that. He keep seizing more territories and land during the previous year, but the situation is in Syria is very complicated due to the economic situation, due to that the lack of military people who's Assad trying to keep recruiting people. So there is several difficulties facing Assad to achieve that, but the attack and the targeting civilians on Idlib will keep continue. Actually, Assad will keep threatening any we can say opposite government or local council who is trying to make livelihood in any area out of his control. He want to show himself that he is dominating the Syria, which is untrue at all. And I think that the Russia is with Assad and Iran as well until the end in this game, actually, until there is a pressure, opposite pressure from the international community with Turkish government and with other side. Americans should engage, the European as well. That means that the suffering of Idlib will continue, and there is no stability at Syria at all, and Syria moving toward failed state, actually, as we are noticing. It's divided at three territories, and this dilemma will continue like this for maybe several years ago.
Unfortunately, we're not getting strong condemnations from the international community. But Ali, you just previously mentioned that Turkey might intervene in the region again, both in Idlib and the other parts east of the Euphrates. Wouldn't it further strain its ties with Russia?
I don't think so. Russia is aware that Turkey has two main concerns in the area. The first is another eruption of the humanitarian disaster emanating from Idlib. And the second is the creation of a PKK terror state along its borders. And if we, today, the United Nations announced that there might be a permanent ceasefire in Libya. And I'm expecting that if that holds, Turkey is going to move its resources and attention from Libya to Syria, focusing more on the solution of the problem. Therefore, I think Russia is going to cooperate with Turkey in its resolving the needs, particularly creating a safe zone for the refugees.
All right, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Aisha Suberkash. If you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.